So if you've been watching my videos for long enough, you might have seen a few videos where I've used dip pens, or I've probably alluded several times to me using dip pens. And really, one of my favourite hobbies apart from using fountain pens is dip pens. They provide a completely different writing experience to fountain pens. Usually the nibs are a lot more flexible, and you can get so many different types of grinds and different nib shapes, and it is really awesome. So you can use it for other scripts such as Copperplate and Florence script. So some of the dip pens that I have right now, these are the more traditional dip pens. These are speedball pens, and these are some of the many nibs that I have. And another pen that I also have is a glass dip pen, and this was pretty fun to use. So one of the things that I recently bought off eBay was this. This is a feather dip pen that I purchased off eBay for about $5. For that $5 you get this really cool feather dip pen with a proper nib, and you'll also get this free vial of 10 mils of black ink with it. It says Harry Potter on it, though you can't really notice it because it's black ink on a black backing sticker on black ink. But it is black Harry Potter ink, and it is pretty runny and not the best quality, though I will show it in the writing example. Though one thing that I do have to pick out from this pen is the really low quality bottle. It obviously has bladder issues because in the 3 weeks that it was in shipment from China to Australia, it obviously shat itself, and I was greeted with a lovely inky mess when I opened up the packaging. And I really find it really cool to use this feather pen just because I think it's a pretty cool aesthetic. Obviously I'm not going to be using this every day, but when I do crack this thing open, I do think it's cool just to look over and see this giant feather moving as you're writing. And I really do have to stress, this is a giant feather. This thing clocks in at about 35 centimeters long, so it is much longer than any other pen that I have ever used. 35 centimeters is cool, and honestly, I am using this pen for the aesthetics. I'm not going to be taking this to any other locations. I don't think you can put it in a pocket or anything. So it's really cool, and I probably would have been disappointed if the feather was any thinner, any shorter. Speaking of thinness though, this is an incredibly thin feather. This thing clocks out at a maximum of about 5 mils, and well, honestly, what else can you expect? It's a feather. I don't think it would be any thicker. Well, maybe apart from this guy, but he's extinct. That pen's long gone, and it being 5 mils is something that's a little bit challenging to hold. I sometimes struggle using thinner pens such as the Parker Vector, but this is something on a completely new scale, and boy, holding this pen for periods of longer than about 5 to 10 minutes really just messes up your writing. So if you have really big hands, you might want to avoid using this pen. But honestly, I don't think you're going to be using this pen for long writing stints because it's a dip pen, and honestly, dip pens are pens that obviously you got to re-dip every now and then, and this thing offers a maximum of about I think it's 100 to 110 characters, and yes, while you will get about 100 to 110 characters, the ink will start to run out a little bit before that, because when you dip this pen and start writing, you're going to get a really saturated line of ink, and as you keep writing, the amount of ink available is less and less and less, and by the time you get to the end, the lines will be a lot thinner, and pretty much you'll have to re-dip it at about, you know, word 80, or because it's going to be a lot thinner and it's going to be a lot lighter. One good thing about this nib though is it is a fountain pen nib, and if this nib looks a little bit familiar, it's probably because this nib is found on other pens such as the Jinhao 992, and honestly this is pretty much the exact same nib, except it doesn't say Jinhao and it doesn't say what type of nib it is. I think this one here is a fine, though it acts more like a medium, and these newer Jinhao nibs are really good. I'm pretty happy that they went with these nibs because they've ground them well, and it's not very scratchy, though unlike my other dip pens, it is pretty stiff. Jinhao nibs aren't very stiff, this one included, and sorry, Jinhao nibs are very stiff, this one included, so when you try and press down, you're not going to get much flex. And honestly, I wouldn't press down if I was you, because it's held in this feather by this, I don't know, like this sort of collet sort of thing, and I'm not sure how much force it would take before this stiff feather would crack, so honestly, I'm not going to press down much. Speaking of using a fountain pen nib, that is one of the highlights of this pen, because even though it is pretty stiff, it provides a much better writing experience than these pens. Not because these pens are untipped and do grab into the paper, but more so because these pens here have nibs made from spring steel, which means these nibs do rust over time. This is made from stainless steel, it's coated in some sort of metal, and it also means that this pen will not rust over time, which I am pretty happy about. Some other things that I want to point out about this, well, feather, other than a pen, is even though that this is a white pen, I probably should have requested to get the black pen, because there are some stains starting to develop up along here, and I think black would have been better. Alright then, welcome to the writing sample for the Chinese feather dip pen, and in this sample we're going to be using this. This is the Harry Potter black ink that it comes with, and I just got to say, first of all, this ink is not amazing. First of all, we'll start off with the bottle. This cap here does nothing. It doesn't provide a seal, so if you put this on, the ink is just going to leak out. So what they've done is they've provided this rubber bung that you put in right here to stop it leaking, and that's very good and all, but it's hard plastic and it doesn't fit, and the ink leaks anyway, and when you come to take it off you get ink on your fingers. I just wanted to point that out. So let's get started. Now, one thing I should mention, you don't want to get too much ink on the nib, just enough to get to the breather hole. Otherwise, it will be incredibly wet writing. So, this is the feather dip pen. It has a medium nib. It's a Chinese medium nib, so it's probably a Japanese broad. As I said, ink is this ink here, and honestly I do think this pen writes a little bit better if you just upgrade to something such as maybe Waterman or Pelikan or Lamy ink, but this is the ink that it comes with, and I'll use this ink, though it is going to be a little bit wetter than normal. The paper is Clairefontaine, and you will certainly need Clairefontaine with this. So let's get started on a writing sample. Alright, that is the writing sample of this pen, and honestly, anyone who gets me that is going to be in my good books. That'll be awesome. Anyway, so, getting back to the pen, this writing sample really just demonstrates this pen. I made sure to ink the nib up a little bit less, just so I could show you what happens when you refill. So, this is the normal writing that you're going to get, and as you can see at the very end, the line width really does get shorter the less ink is on the nib. Really, there's no flex to this, and it's really dependent on how much ink is on the bottom side of this nib. And as you can see, this is pretty much the end of the ink supply, and that's when I come back, and you can see I haven't pressed down any harder, but the line is much thicker here, and if I just kept going, it would start to become thinner. So while yes, it can write for 100 characters, you really want to refill at maybe, well, I don't know, you want to refill when you can noticeably see the line width getting a little bit thinner. So around about here, where it says Christmas, that is when an eye would start to refill. In terms of actually writing with this pen, it was smooth, it was nice, it just wasn't too comfortable to hold. It was a little bit finicky at times. Now, if we look at natural line variation, you aren't going to get much in terms of natural line variation. And if you press down with the nib, we can squeeze a little bit of line variation out of it, but really what we're looking at is more ink running onto the paper, more so than the tines actually you know, splitting apart. And you can really see that because it is much, in fact these are much wetter lines here, and it's all down to more ink just coming off. If we look at reverse writing, if you look at reverse writing, this pen writes reverse writing well when there's a lot of ink on it, though if there's not this much ink on it, no chance in the world. And if we look at wetness, well, I don't really know why, because it really is dependent on how much ink is on the bottom of the nib. You can try wetness there, and you can re-dip it, and then try wetness again. And it'll be a little bit wetter, though wetness like this, yeah, it really is dependent on the stroke and how much ink is on the nib. And I'm pretty sure that is it. Thank you for watching the writing sample for this pen. Awesome, lovely little pen. Honestly, I do enjoy writing this as a hobby, though there is no way you could get me to write with this on a regular basis. Thank you for watching.